They'll call it settling. It's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy, and you pay for it every time you say no to something impressive. 5 signs you didn't retreat into a boring life. You earned one. And by sign 5, you'll know exactly what it bought. Because there's a deal in this culture nobody ever says out loud. You get to exist out loud while you're producing something worth reporting. Stop producing, and the room goes quiet. Not cruel, just quiet. And then an entire industry steps in to explain that quiet back to you. You've lost your edge. You've gone soft. You're wasting what you have. Iris is 38 and lives in Spokane. Every December, her younger sister makes the family holiday card, the kind with 4 photos in a grid and a paragraph on the back. And every December, she texts the same request to everyone. 1 line about your year. Iris has a library book 40 days overdue in her passenger seat and a bag of salted cashews in her desk drawer at work that she's been rationing since March. She walks the same loop past the same 4 houses, and she knows all 4 dogs by name, which is a strange thing to be true about a woman most of her family describes as private. She read the text on a Tuesday. She started typing. She stopped. She typed something about work being steady, deleted it, and put the phone face down on the counter. But it isn't that nothing happened to her that year. Something did. It just didn't come with a headline on it, and her sister's card only had room for headlines. So Iris sent nothing, and spent the rest of that night feeling like a woman who owed somebody proof of 12 months of being alive. That feeling has a shape, and it shows up as 5 specific behaviors. 5 things people who choose quiet lives do without ever calling it a choice. Sign 1. They stopped paying the upkeep on people, and almost nobody left. Every friendship runs on upkeep. The birthday text, the like on the photo, the "we should catch up soon" that everyone knows is a ritual and nobody treats as a lie. Robin Dunbar, the anthropologist who gave us the number 150, roughly how many people one human being can hold a real relationship with at once, spent his career measuring what those relationships actually cost. Not money, hours. Other primates handle it by grooming each other, physically, for a good chunk of every day. We do it with talk. Researchers still call it social grooming, which is a genuinely humiliating way to describe your group chat, but it's accurate. And here's the part that matters. The circle isn't flat. Inside that 150, there's a layer of about 15 people who'd actually show up for you, and inside that, a core of 5 who are the load-bearing walls. Those 5 take something close to 40% of all the social time you have, which means every hour spent on the outer ring is an hour taken from the inner 5. Not poetically, arithmetically. So people who crave quiet stop paying the outer ring. They don't announce it. They don't cut anyone off. They just stop starting things. And then they wait, half expecting to be punished for it. And almost nothing happens. A few accounts quietly close. The 5 stay. Some of them get closer, because for the first time in years, there are actual hours available to be there. So you didn't lose your friends. You stopped subsidizing acquaintances with time that belonged to the people who love you. Before sign 2, the thing almost everyone has backwards. A boring life is not where you go when you run out of energy. It's the hardest thing on this list to hold on to, and most people can't stay in one longer than a season. They get 4 quiet weeks and start manufacturing an emergency, a project, a fight, a reason to be needed somewhere at 8 on a Saturday. Because quiet starts asking questions that noise was covering. You don't retreat into this. You survive it, or you don't. Sign 2. Fewer options make them feel lighter, not trapped. In the mid-90s, a researcher named Sheena Iyengar set up a tasting booth inside a grocery store in Menlo Park, California. Draeger's, the fancy kind, the kind that stocks 250 mustards. On some days, the booth offered 24 jams. On other days, 6. The big display pulled the bigger crowd, obviously. 60% of shoppers stopped, versus 40. But then they went to actually buy something. Of the people who saw 6 jams, about 30% bought one. Of the people who saw 24, 3%. Same jam, Same store. The only thing that changed was how many doors were open. Psychologists call it choice overload, and the mechanism is unglamorous. Every option you consider has to be held, compared, and then quietly mourned when you don't pick it. 24 jars isn't freedom. It's homework, with a little grief attached to it. So scale that up to a life. Same coffee, same route, same 2 nights a week that belong to nobody. From the outside, it looks like a person who ran out of imagination. From the inside, it's a person who took 20 jars off the shelf on purpose so the 6 that matter would finally get chosen. And that's what people mean when they say a boring life feels lighter. Nothing about it got smaller. The menu got shorter, and the morning stopped. If any of this is landing, subscribing costs you nothing, and it keeps this kind of video reaching people who are quietly wondering whether something's wrong with them. Sign 3 is where it stops being about your calendar and starts being about who gets into the room. Sign 3. They measure closeness by the silences, not the conversations. So ask most people how close they are to someone, and they'll reach for the best conversation they ever had, the night that ran until 2, the goodbye at the airport. But people who crave quiet use a different instrument entirely. They measure the longest stretch of silence neither person felt any need to fix. And there's real machinery under that. When 2 people are genuinely comfortable together, their bodies start to line up. Breathing, posture, the small rhythms underneath speech. Psychologists call it interactional synchrony, and it shows up strongest not while people perform for each other, but while they're doing nothing in the same room. Talk hides almost anything. 2 people can fill 90 minutes and walk away knowing nothing. So there's a test running that the other person never sees. 20 minutes in the car with the radio off. Does that feel like rest, or does it feel like a bill coming due? And some of you aren't choosing a boring life. You're waiting for the exciting one to come back, and calling it contentment because waiting sounds worse. That's a different situation, and it deserves an honest answer instead of a slogan. But for the people who did choose this, silence isn't absence. It's the only room where nobody's performing. Sign 4. A day doesn't have to be told to anyone to count. Most people are running a low-grade broadcast in the back of the head. Not on purpose. Something good happens, and some part of you starts composing the version you'll tell later. Who'd find it funny? How you'd phrase it. And there's a name for what that costs. Attention residue. The piece of your focus that stays stuck on one thing while you're supposedly doing the next. Except here, the next thing is your own afternoon. But people who've been quiet a long time lose that narrator. Not all at once. It gets bored and wanders off, and one Saturday you notice you spent 4 hours on something and never once thought about how you'd describe it. So that's the same doorway. Deep focus comes through. The work stops being watched and starts steering itself. There's a version of this that isn't good, and I want to name it. Some people go quiet and find room. Some go quiet and find nothing. The good stops landing along with the bad. That's a different mechanism, with its own wiring. If your quiet feels flat rather than roomy, there's a video on this channel for that one. For everyone else, it's simpler than it sounds. A day nobody hears about isn't a day that didn't happen. It's a day that didn't have to earn its keep. Sign 5. They stopped earning the right to exist. And this is the one that takes the longest. It bought everything else on this list. Somewhere early, most of us picked up a rule nobody ever wrote down. You're worth roughly what you most recently produced. Psychologists call it contingent self-worth. Your value, repriced daily, against output. It's an efficient rule. It's also rented, and rent comes due every morning. And you've felt the bill. It's Sunday night dread on a vacation you paid for. It's the way "how have you been" turns instantly, in your head, into a list of things accomplished. It's explaining a slow year before anyone asked. But quiet takes that rule apart. Nobody's around to price the day, so the day doesn't get priced. And after enough unpriced days, something in the chest lets go and doesn't grab back. The rarest thing you can own now is a life nobody has to hear about. And think about what everyone around you is building. An audience, a brand, a documented existence, evidence stacked up in case anyone asks. And the one thing none of it buys back is being unremarkable on purpose. A week without submitting yourself for review. That used to be the default setting for a human being. So here's the reframe. A boring life isn't the absence of a good one. It's what a good one looks like once you stop charging admission. Everything on this list is a purchase, not a surrender. You bought back your hours. You bought a shorter menu. You bought a Tuesday that counts even though nobody heard about it. You're allowed to have a life that doesn't summarize well. 3 things to do with that. First, pick one piece of upkeep you're only paying out of habit. The standing text. The group thing you dread on the drive over. Stop paying it for 30 days. And don't announce it, because announcing it makes it an event. Then watch who reaches out anyway. That's your 5. Second, shorten a menu on purpose. Take one decision you make fresh every day. Breakfast, what you wear, what goes on at night. And settle it for a month. It won't feel like less. It'll feel like 20 jars finally came off the shelf. Third, and this is the one that actually moves something. Do one good thing this week and tell nobody. No photo. No mention when someone asks how your weekend went. Not because sharing is bad. Because you need to feel, in your own body, what a day is like when it counts without an audience. Most people haven't felt that since they were 9. It's disorienting for about an hour. Then it's the best thing you own. Iris never sent her sister a line. The card went out with 3 photos and a paragraph, and a gap in it where a whole year of her life was supposed to be. Her sister thinks she's being difficult. She isn't. She knows what that year cost her, and she isn't going to price it down to 1 sentence for the back of a card. And she'll get the same text next December. She'll probably do the same thing. So tell me this in the comments. What's the most boring part of your week? The part you genuinely fight somebody to keep? I read them. That answer tells me more than any highlight would. And if the quiet you've got right now feels flat instead of roomy, if the good stopped landing along with the bad, that's not this. Something specific shut off, and it can be pointed at. The video on what goes quiet in there and why it isn't damage is the one to start with.